In today's video, we're going to be diving in to the upcoming pattern, as well as taking a massive look at what is now Hurricane Milton, expected to become Major Hurricane Milton before slamming into the coast of Florida. This storm has obviously already rapidly intensified, unfortunately, already into a hurricane, as we saw a lot of our models showing yesterday. A hurricane by this afternoon is what we ended up getting, and a lot of those same models called for a category 4 or 5 hurricane. I can be quoted as saying yesterday that we are going to tell how accurate these models are very quickly because they're calling for a hurricane by tomorrow afternoon. This was yesterday, of course. Um, and sure enough, we saw that occur. So in the short range, they're accurate. That's a really bad sign that they're going to continue to likely be accurate in intensity throughout those, next few days after that as well. Overall, bad news. Just really, really bad news for everybody. I was thinking heavily about it all day today with everything still going on in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, and probably some other states as well that I didn't mention. How much work and recovery and rebuilding still needs done as far as infrastructure, and it goes beyond. But there's so many emergency workers that need to be working as far as the impacts from Helene, and now that work is going to be spread thin if we get this second major hurricane slamming into the coast of Florida, maybe being very devastating as well, likely being very devastating as well. So just really, really bad news on all regards, and that's been heavy on my mind. I hope you guys know. So let's go ahead and dive into things. I really just want to just take a look here. And what we're seeing is our storm there in the Gulf. Lots of moisture out ahead of it. We see our strong low up here in Canada with a cold front out ahead of it. Let's take this towards tomorrow afternoon. We're going to look at more hurricane models later on. Rest assured, we do see this storm is near the Yucatan Peninsula. So that is one of the pieces of good news, is that this storm will have a little bit more land interaction likely than we anticipated with that Yucatan Peninsula. That will likely hold things back from their maximum potential. No matter how strong it is at landfall, it could have been stronger if it did not interact with the Yucatan Peninsula, so keep that in mind. We see cooler air in the east, warmer in the west. I don't want to spend too much time on that because at the end of the day, that's not even close to as important as this. We do see a 966 on this particular model for this tropical system, Hurricane Milton, likely Major Hurricane Milton by this point, by Tuesday afternoon, that is. And it's kind of now expected to do a very far northern swing here at the end. So we originally expected kind of a straight line across. So I'll do in the black kind of what we expected. Kind of just a straight line across something like this. And in a different color, I'll do it in yellow to make things easy. We kind of ended up seeing this now being the expected path, and it's almost the same exact outcome regardless, but we see this kind of slow curve to the south. This might slow down the storm a little bit, I guess, in kind of a counter argument. So we do get the Yucatan Peninsula land interaction. It probably has more time to develop because of this as well. So it's a double-edged sword, and we definitely have two sides to that. But I think overall that southern swing is slightly good news. Still, probably and almost certainly at this point a major hurricane slamming into Florida. So it's not going to be the saving grace or really get us out of the water at all by any means, but it could save us from 10 or 20 miles per hour of intensity perhaps. As we reach Wednesday afternoon, we're very close to landfall here. This particular model is going to show something around the Tampa Bay as far as landfall here, as you can see, which is, again, worst case scenario. We do see landfall at some point between like 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. on Wednesday, October 9th on this model. It might stick out to you, that's still 3 days from now. There's a lot of time for intensification still, and that's very bad news, of course. I want to keep going. This does cross off the East Coast, and thankfully, once it does kind of just head straight off the East Coast and dissipates. We don't get any land interaction off that East Coast, of course. Now, the bad news for the folks in Florida that do need to evacuate, and there's a lot of them that will need to evacuate, I want to emphasize that, Especially these same areas were heavily impacted by Helene. Who knows what happens when a second major hurricane slams right into those areas, with furniture stacked on the streets, ruined things all over the place. I feel like everything is just, worse because Helene hit first. That's only one thought. And that storm just hit, but the other thought that I have is, where do they go, right? Like, do they go south to southern Florida, or do they go north? Because if you go north, you're going straight to where Helene has already knocked out the power and a lot of the infrastructure. I really feel like the only place for these people to go is like further towards the South Carolina coast or as far west as maybe Mississippi or Alabama, because you're not really moving into areas that are ready for you, like Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. I would imagine that the hotels are filled up with people that aren't in their homes anymore. And that's not official advice or guidance. I'm just kind of pointing out some of the problems that are maybe going to arise and make this storm even worse. Kind of adverse effects because of the fact that Helene had hit just about a week ago. We are definitely seeing a troubling situation unfolding, in my opinion. And again, all these things have been very heavy on my mind. We get our strong cold front here, which again is really an afterthought during this video. Hardly on my mind, but we do get a stronger low for New England. Some rainfall and wind could be around. And really, we do get some nice, refreshing, cool air down the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic Northeast from this, with a kind of a classic nor'easter look here. And that sticks around for the East Coast for a little while before eventually warming back up, of course. As we take a look at the temperature pattern, which we will touch on very briefly, we do see warm conditions with that cooler air moving in with this first cold front. So this is tomorrow afternoon on Monday. Here is the next afternoon on Tuesday. We are going to see some cold temperatures show up from Milton. These hurricanes do tend to bring cooler temperatures underneath them. So Wednesday, we see that for Florida and Georgia. So we see this cooler air partially because of our cold front. We still have some cooler air up here, but a lot of this is going to be a result of Milton on the southeast side of things. That tends to happen, and we see that here as well. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that really keeps the cool air around for the southeast for days. And then we get our actual Arctic blast here starting out on Monday, the 14th. Here's Tuesday, the 15th. And then we don't really get beyond that on this particular forecast for Wednesday. But we can imagine, as you can see, this is by 8 a.m. It's going to be another cooler day along the east. And who knows how long that's going to last. Let's just talk more about Milton. That's basically the only thing we're going to talk about as far as just the upcoming pattern outside of Milton. This is kind of your wind gusts by tomorrow after. Well, actually, this is kind of the morning run from this morning. So I want to see where it has us by about this point that we're at. So it's 6 p.m. as I'm recording. We'll skip to 7. 56.9 miles per hour. Wouldn't even be a category 1, and it is a category 1. So keep in mind that this model is about maybe 20 plus miles per hour more minor than it actually is right now. So that could kind of play into what happens moving forward. By tomorrow afternoon, it's not even a hurricane. It doesn't even have us getting to hurricane status until 10 p.m. on Monday. And quite frankly, it's more likely to be a major hurricane by that point than anything. Tuesday afternoon, we do have 108 miles per hour, which would put us at a strong category 2 hurricane. Again, it's Tuesday afternoon, rapidly intensifying up to a category 4 hurricane by 0.1 miles per hour right here. So this would be 12 a.m. on Wednesday. So you can see that rapid intensification is expected kind of between these points here. So this is a really crucial time frame in the storm where a lot of the development happens. We've already seen I'm going to draw an up arrow for a way exceeding expectations of intensification in the beginning of the track here. So we've seen a huge surge of intensification that we did not really anticipate too much. I mean, we knew it was possible, but it's exceeding even what we really thought was going to happen. Probably as it's approaching the coast, I would imagine that we will see a little less intensification, obviously, maybe even a little bit of slowing down as it approaches the coast. That's my number one hope at this point. As we reach towards Wednesday afternoon, we do actually see that down to 117, which would be a category 3. And then, as you can see, slams right into the Tampa Bay. I think the eye of the hurricane there, I'll put us over the state of Florida here. But you can see that the eye of that hurricane is literally over the Tampa Bay here, right about right there. So that is absolutely terrible for that, obviously, very majorly populated area in Florida. Just really terrible. We do see the storm cross over the state and actually bring over hurricane force winds to a lot of the east coast of Florida as well. And I imagine central Florida won't really escape those hurricane force winds as well. So we really get across the state of Florida hurricane force winds. It's going to be a terrible storm for you guys. Let's take a look at the GFS model, which by this afternoon has us only 10 miles per hour away from hurricane status, still below what ended up happening, but a little bit closer, and it does have us at hurricane status by 2 a.m. tonight. Obviously, we're already at hurricane status, so still a little slow, but I'd say a lot closer to what we actually are seeing by the time we're reaching 2 a.m. on Tuesday. We're right at about category 2 status, approaching category 3 already. So this is just tomorrow night, and we hit category 3. Let's see, even if we even hit it here, I don't think we do actually. I think we get just a plain category 2. Here we go. Maybe this is, yeah, category 3 by about 0.7 miles per hour right before landfall, which would be terrible to see an intensifying storm here. Keep in mind this GFS model is a little lower resolution than even the European model is, and sometimes you lose some detail there, some crucial detail. There could be, if this model was higher resolution, some smaller areas in there that do see stronger winds, but this is more of a broad forecast, so you sometimes lose some of the intensity when you look at this particular model. We're going to move into some actual hurricane models in a minute though, but look at how the eye actually moves way to the north of the Tampa Bay. We actually see this storm strike into the Big Bend here, so a little bit of a different outlook here from the GFS model, and this is an outlier at this point. I must point out that a lot of models are not calling for that, but it's worth noting. Here's the total rainfall in the European model. In the reds, we're seeing 2 to 5 inches. Browns are 5 to 10. And then those blues are 10 to 15, even seeing some of those magentas popping up near like St. Petersburg area. And we're seeing 15 to 20 inches of rainfall in there. We really see a lot of the browns and blues crossing the state. So again, these impacts are going to be almost a swath straight through the central portion of Florida. Like the rainfall here, it doesn't look too much worse on the western end than it is on the eastern end, or even the central areas are slightly less rainfall. So some of these impacts like this, you're not really getting out. You're not really out of the water if you're not along that west coast, I guess is what I'm getting at. This GFS model has it much further to the north, but amounts are very similar. Again, browns, blues, magentas there. So pretty on par. Again, GFS model is an outlier. We will continue to watch this and see if it continues to show this northern solution. But at this point, we have, 10, 20, 30 models calling for it, like just to the north of the Tampa Bay and south of there would be like the consensus. And then this model's way off to the north. So this is an outlier and, something that we will pay attention to, but it is not nearly even the most likely outcome yet at this point. The wind swath, this is the wind gust swath, so keep in mind this is for the entirety of the storm at any given location, the maximum winds you see. And we do see that there is oranges and reds throughout the state of Florida. That's going to put us, well into tropical storm status, kind of a stronger tropical storm. Browns are about hurricane status, into the whites, which are definitely hurricane status, and then the reds is more of your major hurricane, or at least very close to it. So we're seeing obviously the Tampa Bay in there, and then the east side also seeing some hurricane status winds, not necessarily major hurricane status winds, but definitely enough to be damaging and impactful. For the GFS model, we get this a little further to the north, just like everything else on this model, but again, major hurricane winds here along the Big Bend and just to the south towards St. Petersburg. And then we get hurricane status winds kind of on that northeast coast of Florida, and also for the east coast of Georgia a little bit as well because of this northern solution. Let's take a look at some of these hurricane models. This is your HAFSA model. And as you can see, it does have us at hurricane status at the proper time. And let's just track this one. It does have us at major hurricane status. Let's see when it has it by. This might be a little overzealous. It has it by 2 a.m. tonight. So we'll have to see if that happens. But 2 a.m. tonight is when this model has us crossing into category 3 by about a mile per hour, 1.5 miles per hour here. And it surges past that. This is by time we're looking at 2 p.m. tomorrow on Monday. What we see is 131 miles per hour, which would be already category 4. And then we surge past that even towards 160, which would put us at category 5 hurricane by tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Take this with a grain of salt. This is like some of the most aggressive modeling I've seen, period. 187 miles per hour is absolutely insane, well past major hurricane status. And we actually get to, or category 5 status, sorry. We get to 197.8 here, which would be like bordering on like a top 5 most intense Atlantic hurricane ever. So that is obviously insane. And we don't cross 200, which would put it in like an echelon where there's only a few storms really. We do see some really quick, scaling back of the intensity. It's still at category 5, but it's like 20 miles or 10 miles per hour weaker here by this point. And we do see it kind of weakens down. We see it just narrowly at category 5 status before landfall. And it's clearly a 4 or even weaker as it's landfalling. Obviously, these storms do weaken as they hit. We see that occur. And we do get the hurricane status winds back on that east coast of Florida again. To pay attention to where it landfalls again, we see your low pressure center right here, the eye of the hurricane. Just to the north of the Tampa Bay. This would be a worst case scenario as we see the winds wrapping into the Tampa Bay. I think this solution would be even worse than the eye heading right over the bay. Keep in mind, just because of how intense those winds are and how much water they would force up into the bay there. I think either solution would be absolutely devastating, but I think this could even be a little bit worse than, again, the eye going right over the Tampa Bay. Now let's take a look at this one's sister model. This is the HAFSB. We see that currently we only get 5 and 8. We'll go with 8. We have 101 miles per hour. I think that's a little overkill, but not that far off. And we do get, let's see when we get major hurricane status with this one. We do get this by 8 a.m. And we're already kind of approaching category 4 actually on this one. And we do get category 4 by approximately 2 p.m. tomorrow. So pretty similar to its sister model. No surprise there. We do get category 5, and we actually similarly head into historic territory in the upper 190s, even crossing 200 on this one. We get 204 there, kind of sticking around that intensity. We do see the weakening occur as it approaches the coast. Still a category 5. And then weakens down to a category 4, which is crazy to say, a weaker category 4, but it does weaken as it approaches the coast, which could be a good trend. And it landfalls just north of the Tampa Bay. It's a lot closer than its sister model. Again, East Coast gets those hurricane force winds as well in this model. Here's a completely different one, HWRF for Milton. We see that this one is probably the most accurate one we've seen so far as the intensity. It has us right at about 75 miles per hour by 5 p.m. on Sunday. So that's hurricane status and a little bit stronger by the time we're looking at 8 p.m. This one is really, really close as far as the current intensity. This one does get us to major hurricane status, though, by 5 a.m. tomorrow. So by the time you're waking up, likely this would be a major hurricane if this model is correct. We see it continue to intensify from there up into the 130s, and that would put us at category 4 status, and this is by Tuesday morning. So really an intense look, and really this is 8 p.m. on Monday. We already had category 4 status, so really, really intense look. I want to see, we don't ever hit category 5 on this one, thankfully. We get a landfall as a category 3 there. And this one's a little further north than any of the other hurricane models. We do get the wind flowing right into the Tampa Bay, but the landfall likely happening on the very, very southern quadrant of the Big Bend. So a lot closer to the GFS model, but still not even really that close to being as far north as that. Again, hurricane force winds for the northeastern coast of Florida, as well as the east coast of Georgia there. Keep that in mind. Let's take a look here at this HMON model. And this one by 5 p.m. also has this at hurricane status. So very, very accurate. We do see that by time we're reaching tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., let's see, we do have major hurricane status here at a Category 3. Surges past Category 4 by 8 p.m. on Monday, so very similar to that past model we just looked at. And it sticks around at that Category 4 status for a long time, never crossing over Category 5. And this one is very close to those initial two models with that landfall just to the north of the Tampa Bay. Let's see the impacts for the East Coast here on this model. And yeah, some hurricane force winds definitely for that East Coast as well. Very strong winds even for South Carolina, even southern North Carolina likely as well. Let's take a look at the spaghetti model guidance. This was from this morning at 8 a.m. We saw somewhere between Tampa Bay and Fort Myers being the consensus. As we move forward to this afternoon's run at 2 p.m., and we see that the middle of it, you can hardly tell, but the middle of it is right around Tampa Bay, maybe even a little further north. So we've seen this north tick once again during the afternoon model runs, which is a worst case scenario for the Tampa Bay area, and even probably really bad for Fort Myers as well. Although if it was just to the north of them, that would be worse for them even. But really, everybody gets impacted pretty bad in this solution. The intensity guidance, this is from the 2 a.m. model run, so kind of like the overnight model run. And we saw a couple of models one flirting with Category 5. We saw a handful with 4. I would say mean average is somewhere like a Category 3, weak Category 3, and then kind of dropping back down, of course. So landfall is somewhere in this area at that point. As we move towards the morning runs, the 8 a.m. runs, we see 2 showing Category 5, many more showing Category 4, and really the consensus at this point was a stronger Category 3 or weak Category 4 probably before weakening. Again, landfall somewhere in this quadrant of the model. And then for this afternoon's model run, we hit kind of a worst forecast yet. This is the 2 p.m. model runs. We do have more on the way, of course. The consensus is kind of a low to mid Category 4 now by this point, with landfall again somewhere in this area. Very, very intense look. And every single model run, we actually gained an extra model showing Category 5. The first one was 1 model, the second one was 2 models, and this one is now 3 models. So we're seeing overall a worsening outlook every single model run, which is just really, really bad news. As we take a look at the 2-day graphical tropical weather outlook, you see we currently have 3 hurricanes out there in the Atlantic. Hurricane Kirk, Hurricane Leslie, and Hurricane Milton. So very interesting. 85 miles per hour, 90 miles per hour, 85 miles per hour. Pretty intense hurricanes out here. 3 of them. So this hurricane season is turning around in a hurry, and I think this one is going to go down as an infamous one. It started out very slow, for early September, August timeframe, but it has turned around in a terrible way. And, I think this hurricane season will be looked back on as an infamous one at this point because of Helene. Already that was enough for it to be an infamous one. But now with the question mark of what Milton is about to do, I just really feel like this has been a bad one. As we move on to the official National Hurricane Center cone forecast here, we're expecting major hurricane by tomorrow at 1 p.m. We see it remain that way until it strikes Florida. Probably the middle of their forecast is maybe a little under the Tampa Bay area. I do expect them to tick this north, especially if the overnight model runs today show another tick to the north or continue to show that same area near the Tampa Bay. I suspect their middle of their forecast will probably follow that as well. Anywhere from the Big Bend down through south of Fort Myers is really possible for this storm to landfall. We're watching it closely. You remember how wide the cone was yesterday? It has thinned out actually a little bit. It's still rather wide. So we're going to be watching it closely. Really just a terrible situation. I will keep you guys up to date, of course, so be sure to subscribe. We do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.